I'm so excited for today, not only because I have my friend Yael Cabilly here with me, and she's just an incredible mind. I mean, she's an incredible businesswoman, and she has helped me get ready to sell my business. And not only that, she's always given me just really great. She's like the go-to girl for everything Amazon legal advice, whatever you need, she's got you covered. And so I asked her to come today to talk to us a little bit about what happens behind the scenes of selling your business. You know, we have all of these aggregators out there, and we're hearing all these exit stories because the exit scene is bigger than ever right now. And it's also very complicated because we hear good stories and we also hear, hey, I got a deal, but I'm not getting my earnouts. And we're like, wait a minute, don't you just sell your business and get a check and walk away, right? How does it work, you know? So we're going to get a little bit behind the scenes today and just kind of dig into what happens when you sell your business. What are those different structures, all of that. And Yael always brings the best content when it comes to this stuff. She has a great way of just teaching this in an easy to understand way. And I know that this is something that so many of us are wondering about. You know, is now a good time to sell with all of the things that are going on? I know I recently saw a few articles about different leaders resigning from different aggregators, and like, whoa, what is happening? And when we were at Prosper in Vegas, they did this big expose about all of the finance area of what's going on. So there's no better time than now to get into this and to really talk about what is happening. And as a seller and as a consultant, I'm happy to represent you guys and ask the questions that I know you have, because I have them too. And I'm so happy to have Yael here from Fortunet to help us understand that. And by the way, we're celebrating today on our YouTube channel. We just reached 1,000 subscribers. I can't believe it. It's so exciting. Yay!
I was going to say, when are you going to say
it? Yay. So I'm so excited that you all are here. Please say hello in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn later. Definitely check that out and say hello. We want to hear from you. And Yael, do you want to tell us a little bit about you and your background?
Sure. Thanks for having me, especially on this particular day of celebration, 1,000, very, very exciting. People ask me, like, how are you related? Because you wrote it on the same post. How are you related to 1,000? I said, I'm not related, but I'm her friend. So does it count? So I'm Yael Cabilly. I'm originally a lawyer, a trademark lawyer. Before I got into the M&A space, I founded the law firm in 2016 named Cabilly, where we help sellers with all the legal issues. In 2018, I co-founded with two partners, Michal and Omri. I co-founded a company named Fortunet, which is an investment banking firm where we help sellers, mostly medium and large businesses, going through the process. We're really focused on the sales side. We don't represent buyers. We focus on basically getting the maximum for this particular business at a particular time. So I'm going to explain the process, and you'll understand how it works in a few minutes. But that's us. We're a team today, about 40 people, and yeah, focusing on Amazon FBA. As you're saying, it's been a crazy time, those couple of years, and still growing. So
yeah, thanks. And I think you brings, well, first of all, you are part of the 1,000 because you've helped me create great content on the channel different times. And so, great content from guests like you are the reason that our subscriptions grow every day. It's not just my work, it's everybody who puts we have such a great community in e-commerce, and there's just so many great people that just want to get out there and add value. So I love it. Okay, let's get into it, because I know people are excited about this, and let's do it. So do you want me to share the screen here?
I'll share it just a second, and then you'll tell me if it works.
All right.
Does it work? Works.
Okay. Yes, we see the screen and we see your first slide.
Okay, perfect. So this is us. These are my partner at Fortunet, Michal, the CEO, and Omri, our COO. Michal is originally also a lawyer for 25 years. But in the last 10 years, she's been dealing with M&As. She was VP Business Development of a large brand. And Omri, our CEO, was a seller. He sold his business with us about 2.5 years ago and joined us. He's also a CPA originally. So this is just us, but this is the entire team. So I want to start with we're going to go through the kind of basics, and then we'll go into the details. But I want to start with, why do sellers even sell their account, their business? If it's, very often people ask, if it's something that's profitable, what would you sell the business? And some buyers at the beginning, they ask, they get suspicious. If it's so good, why would you sell it? So most of the sellers, it's interesting. They're saying, I build a brand. I already built it. It's already, let's say, earning that I have a revenue of $5 million per year, and a profit of 1 million. Okay. So every year, my profit is 1 million, but in fact, I get about half of it, because the rest I invest back in the business, sometimes even less than a half. The more I want to grow it, the less, is left. And so I have the option of just, staying with the business, and then every year get $500,000, 200K, or I can sell the business now. There's, if I have $1 million of profit, I can maybe get 6 million or 7 million, or who knows, depending, and we're going to talk about it. I can get it now, several years ahead.
That's such a tough problem, isn't it? We talk about this all the time. It's, you see the fancy revenue screenshots and stuff like that, but the reality is cash flow is tough in this business, in any business that requires inventory, really.
Exactly.
But it's one of the most tough things that we can go through. And what I loved about how you all helped me is you helped me understand what I could do, those things that I could do to change up, the valuation of my business ultimately. And those kinds of things are things that are a real struggle. And a lot of people, when they get started in e-commerce, they've got this big idea in mind that they're going to replace their income from their job, and they're going to be able to just, and a lot of times that's very hard to do until after at least the first year. And then as you're growing and you're scaling, you're kind of developing this balance between, do I scale more? Do I, reinvest? How much money should I take out? Can I afford more inventory? Advertising costs are up. I've stocked out a couple of times, and that cost me more money. I didn't expect to do that. So I agree. It can be tiring. And even if you are making good money, a lot of times the big payout comes when you can sell.
Yeah. There's the, famous sentence, but I'd say, the bottom line is that most of those who sell tell us that I've reached this stage. I got $500,000 a year or less. Depends on how quick I want to grow. I can sell it, and then I'll just build another brand, because I know I can do it. Sometimes they've built already several brands under the same account, but they're also just launching new products, which is kind of similar to building another brand. So a lot of sellers say, I have an opportunity now. There's a market. I can just sell it and then do it again. And others are, just looking at the future, and they're saying, wait, I can sell it now. I'll get 6-7 million, But then if I wait a little, because I'm growing so fast, just in a few months, I'll get to 10 million or 12 million. So maybe it's worth waiting. So the when to sell is the critical and difficult part. So for most sellers, it's not about whether or not to sell, but the when to sell.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult part. Some of them have, a dream of 100 million, and some of them just 50 million. Some of them are fine with just 5. And some of them are fine with 500K. It's really personal, really, really personal. Really changes from one to another. But the bottom line and number one is I can do it again. I'm most likely to sell and then redo it. So that's,
and I think you said something really important there about when to sell, because the thing is, it's really important to get ahead of it. If your end goal is to eventually sell one day, whether whether that's going to be in 1 year or in 5 years or in 10 years, or, if your end goal at some point is to eventually sell, you should talk to a company like Fortunet, because they can help you evaluate where you're at now and what your company might be worth now. And you don't lose anything in doing that, right? So you can make an informed decision of, okay, right now I'm worth this. Here are the things that I can do to be better. And then down the road, it looks like what I want to do is work on this for like 1 to 2 years and then sell, because right now it's not worth what I want it to be worth, right? Because we all have that number in mind that, I'll do anything for a price, right? That right price for selling our business. So it's good to get ahead of it and be a little bit proactive in talking about it. So if you're even thinking about it, go have a conversation, because that'll help you. But doing that with a company like yours versus a company that maybe is going to immediately give you an offer. You guys aren't offering to buy their business. You're helping them evaluate and then sell their business eventually. So I think I know you're going to talk about the.
I should send everyone your way. You're explaining it very well.
Well, you guys helped me understand that. And had I not known, had I not come to you and understood, okay, this is my current valuation, this is what I can do to increase my valuation. Do I want to work on any of those deltas in between? Had I not come to you, and had I waited until it's like, oh, I want to sell right now. Okay, well,
but you can't change that, and you cannot change this. That's a lot of sellers are now, especially the experienced sellers are starting. If they know they want to sell in a year, they are starting to get gather information, even gather a team who they're going to work with, and also a plan of action. We see a lot of sellers that work with us. We start a year before, and then for example, we start working on IP, because design patents increase the valuation. We start talking about taxes, because that's something that, they need to know and think about. And in some cases, it actually changes the whole structure of the deal. So these are things that you may want to do way before. We're now, for example, in the process for 2 different companies. We're in the process of changing their entire structure, so that at the end of the day, when they sell the business, they won't lose a lot of money on the taxes. So that's you're right that it's good to do that in advance, and and try to plan ahead. And going back to what you're saying about when to sell and if to sell, it reminds me, last week I was speaking with a colleague of mine, a service provider that has an agency, and he told me, like, I don't understand this entire M&A thing. Like, why would people sell their business? I'm attached to my business. It's my baby. I'm attached to it. I said, oh, really? And what if someone offered you like 50 million? He said, oh, no, we'd sell it. So,
everybody has a price.
Everything has a price. Exactly. I haven't heard of anybody saying, I would never sell my business.
So you have some other reasons listed here in terms of, you know, I think many people also, they get tired of Amazon. You have the risks on Amazon, and we talked about scaling up a little bit, you know, where the cash flow things and loneliness, maybe they want to go do something else, right? And conflicts and needing money to
when there are
invest
two partners, right, and conflict between partners, you know, where that's one of the only and best way basically to separate is to sell the business. Otherwise you're trying to evaluate how much is worth, who is paying who, and you know, the easiest way to do it is just sell it to a third party, and then they split, and everybody, you know, each partner goes. So we had several cases like that. So let's move to that. We have many topics, so I'll try to move fast. But you know, the next thing is, who are the buyers? I think that most of you already know and heard. So obviously the aggregators and, you know, large e-commerce companies, you've heard about them, you've seen them. Today, when we're recording this video, there's about 70 of them, about $10 billion. Waiting to be invested, waiting just to buy Amazon brands. I'm sure that in a few months the number will be different. So that's the situation. Right? They make most of the deals today. They're competing against each other on every deal, which becomes very interesting. We're going to talk about it later. Private equity firms that we started seeing in the last year, mostly for the larger businesses. Many of them want the seller to stay, but not all of them. Some of them work with an operational team, like they have an agency working with them. Same for VCs. Large Amazon sellers, we're starting to see that sellers who have either already sold their business or are planning to sell their business are now looking at buying, you know, smaller Amazon businesses, or just even without any sale, they just want to add another, let's say, another brand to their account, or just another product to their existing portfolio in their category. They want to expand. So we're starting to see that. Usually sellers don't like to pay high multiples, but it may change in the future, because they're saying, you know, I can do that. I can do it. Why would I pay 7x on the...
I think that's a really interesting point, though. So you have this this part where you're saying, like, large Amazon sellers that are trying to grow and scale. Right. A lot of the aggregators, and they want, you know, $1 million in revenue, sometimes per product, you know, annually. Yeah. So that you might not be there yet. You might be scaling to that, but purchasing a brand that's already done and adding it to your portfolio, I think it's important for us to point out that any one of us, including me, can be a buyer. Yeah. We can go and talk to, there's nothing precluding us from talking to another brand and saying, hey, you know, I might like to buy your brand. I might like to acquire it. What would that look like? And so for those of you who maybe want to sell, but are at a lower valuation, or, you know, you're not at that 1 million per product or 1 million in annual revenue, you're at a smaller amount of revenue. Remember that there are always buyers out there that may be interested in your brand. So don't look at the requirements of, you know, one of the big aggregators and go, oh man, I can never sell my brand, because there's so many opportunities out there.
There are so many other buyers that would buy smaller brands. Again, many sellers buy them to flip, and that way they're willing to pay a little more, because they're saying, you know, I'll buy it now for 4x, and then I'll sell it, I'll grow it, and then I'll sell it for 6x. So they're, you know, they're benefiting from the growth and obviously the multiple that's higher. So some of them, you know, enlarge them and then flip. But these are the buyers that we see. We also see strategic buyers. They're usually a little slower, so you need to approach them in advance, or just, you know, at the very beginning of the process. For example, you know, a toy company, a large toy company that's only offline and want to go online, that would be a good strategic sale. So we talked about the buyers, why to sell. Let's talk about the valuation. That's like the big question everybody asks, and every conversation that I have, how much do you think I'm worth? And I gotta say, when I wrote like here the multiples, I was thinking like, should I write it? Because it's really different, from one business to another. And see the range here. We're talking, 4 to 8. So first, let me explain for those who haven't heard. So the valuation of a business, in most cases, talking again, most cases, not every time. What we're gonna do, the buyer is gonna look at your profit in the last 12 months. I'll explain what the profit is, but we're talking about your profit, not your revenue, for the last 12 months. And then you apply to that a certain multiple, which can be, let's say, 5, okay? So that's the kind of value of your business, plus the inventory. So with the example that we had, if we're talking about 5 million in revenue, you have 1 million of profit, 1 million, you apply to that, let's say a multiple of 5 or 6, you're gonna sell the business for $6 million plus inventory. I'm just, throwing numbers. It depends on the business. I'm going to explain, what are the factors. On top of that, so as I say, on top of the valuation, you have the inventory, and then there's the structure. So we're going to talk about the different structures, but I'll just say in a few words, there are different ways to pay you. Okay, so you could get everything, cash up front. You could get cash plus some deferred payment. Okay, let's say your valuation is 7. Okay, you get $6 million up front, and then let's say 1 million within a year. Every quarter you get paid. Okay, these are the deferred payment, and that's your valuation. Sometimes some buyers offer also profit sharing. Okay, so let's go back to our example. You could get, let's say your multiple is 6 upfront. Okay, so you get 6 million upfront, and then 1 million deferred payment. So you get it within a year, and on top of that, you would get, let's say, 30% of each dollar beyond your current profit. Okay, so let's assume your buyer buys your business. A year from now, instead of 1 million in profit that you had, the buyer has 2 million in profits. They doubled it. Okay, so that the delta, that 1 million, you'll get 30% of it, and maybe you'll get it for 2 years. Maybe the next year the buyer will also offer you that. So there are many ways to structure the deal. In most cases, we at Fortunet really focus on the cash up front. So you would get 90% of it, you would get up front, maybe some stabilization, and profit share is beyond that. So in fact, when we're talking about a multiple, somebody tells you a multiple of 8 or multiple of 9 or who knows, you should ask if it includes the profit share or not, if it includes a deferred payment, how much of it is actually money that you receive up front, and how much of it depends on the buyer and not on yourself because you're not there anymore. Okay, so this is something that, and I'll give you an example. I had I think it was 6 months ago or 7 months ago, I had a seller who told me I'm going to sell my business for 6x. The buyer approached him directly. And I said, great, that's amazing for a business like yours, not so big. And I said, what's the structure? And so he told me it's 2x now, okay, like a multiple of 2 now, and 2x in a year if the business doesn't go down at all, and then 2x depending on this, and that. I mean, he sold it for 2x, not for 6x. So I think you really need to know, when we're talking about multiples and valuations, this is one, for us, it's the fun part. The structure is the best part. But I think that you really need to understand the offer that you receive.
Yeah, what I'm
to evaluate.
hearing from some of the, from some of the bad stories is that someone got a really small payment up front with a guarantee of like, yeah, we're going to pay you out more as soon as your business, your business is going to blow
Right.
up under our management because we
Right.
have all the resources. And so we'll pay you 2x now, right? And then after we blow up your business, then you're going to get all this commission and the other 2x over these payments. And I've heard many situations where the business is not blown up and actually that manager takes over and the business tanks and they end up not earning their money, their earnouts. So some would argue, well, it's not their earnouts, right? Because they agreed to this deal. So that's why it's so important. It's so important that we understand that there's all these different deal structures, and it doesn't always mean that you're just going to walk away. You're going to like get a check and walk away. There's a handover period where you're going to have to help kind of hand over your business. And you want to make sure that you negotiate the best possible upfront payment that you can, and that you understand your valuation. Because if you don't understand your own valuation and you get an offer from an aggregator, that's if you're only going, let's say you only go to one aggregator and you get an offer from them and you take that offer and you don't actually get your business independently evaluated, you aren't really sure what it's worth. You took like a 2x down payment, and then they tank your business, and before you know it, you're not getting any of your earnouts, and you're like, wow, what happened? It's these kinds of things are happening every day. There's a lot of new aggregators in the space, and it's not just aggregators. I don't just want to pick on aggregators because any buyer could make a bad deal with you. You really need to know legally what your rights are under a contract. That goes for anything in business. You need to know what your business is worth before you just take the first lowballed offer that comes your way, right? You have to understand, what you can do to increase your value, and, whether or not the amount of work that's required for that is worth it for you. I think it's really huge to think about all of these things. And it's important for people to understand that it's not just, I'm going to get a check and I'm going to walk away a gazillionaire.
Sometimes, I mean, you can, it's just, you have to structure it right. I think that, if I was the buyer, it's all a matter of risk. If I was the buyer, I would also want to share the risk with the seller. But today it's a seller's market. So why would you agree to that, right? It depends if you can or you cannot. It depends if your business is interesting or not, how hot your business is. The more it's desired, the more, you have offers. We're going to talk about that. The more you can ask for upfront payment and less on the earnout. Some business owners ask to stay in the business actually and remain with the buyers so that they have more control over what's going to happen later. But in most cases, actually, you sell the business. There's a period maybe of 3 months, not more than that. In most cases, it's even less, where you hand over the business and you explain how to run it. But then it's in the buyer's hands. So and that's what I was saying. It's the profit share. I'm all for it. If as long as you know what you're doing, as long as you understand that structure. If I was a buyer, I would also offer it. It kind of it's a balance, but you need to have a good upfront payment regardless. Okay, that's how we look at it at Fortunet, and I think that in today's market, that's the right approach for, at least for the sellers. So that was 60 seconds about maybe more about the structures that we see in this industry, and what to look for. I'll give an example. Our revenue, the numbers are close, but not exactly. We're talking about a beauty brand with about 14 million in revenue, profit of 5.7. They had 5 acting listings. Most of them were growing. The business wasn't that old, about 3 years old. And they got a multiple of 6.7 upfront cash, and then 0.3. I think it was about 6 months later, or over a year every quarter. And on top of that 7x, they also got an earnout. So it was, I think, around 30% of the growth for 2 years. And on top of that, also the inventory. So that was a great deal, a business that was sold recently. So we talked about the multiples, and I told you there's a huge range. I mean, for 4 to 8 doesn't mean anything, right? You don't know if you're 5, 6, 7. The truth is, brokers like to give valuation. We can talk about the last deals that we've done. Every month it's changing. If you go to our our last video together, Amy, I think we're still stuck at 3 to 4 maybe, and that was only a year ago, or maybe more. But those multiples are changing all the time. We didn't see 7x upfront a year ago, and every month it's changing. So you need to be on it. You need to know and consult and know where you are, so that you don't leave $1 million on the table. The multiples that affect this, how do they decide what they offer you, and how much they bid on the business? The main thing that buyers are looking at right now is, are you growing? What's the trend of the business? Is it growing year over year? Businesses that are now severely declining are very difficult to sell. And if they are sold, the multiples are quite low. When we're talking about growing businesses in a kind of evergreen niche, or an evergreen product, something that's not, for example, not fashion, not electronics, but something that they don't need to touch and renew all the time. So if it's growing and it's a good category for them, good reviews, you'll get a very high multiple. They're also looking at things like the competition. If lately there's a crazy competition, and you'll see the trend affected as well. They're looking at patents. So we were discussing earlier, when we start the business, the process early, will help you. I'll sometimes put my legal hat, and then we'll help you find. See if there's an IP that you haven't protected. This is something that increases the value. They want to see how many SKUs you have. If you have, let's say, 1,000 SKUs, it's harder to sell the business than just a couple of SKUs, or up to 20 or 30, or not many. Because it's hard to operate many SKUs, and when you're buying many businesses, you want less, obviously. They're also looking at obviously past suspensions. The size of the business affects the multiples. So the multiple that you saw here, it's a large business. When we're talking about a business with 200K of profit, you see lower multiples. So the size is very important, matters. We're talking, they're looking at suppliers, if you have exclusivity, how many hours, what you're working on the business. That's something that, many buyers are looking at it. And one of the businesses that had the highest numbers of bids was a business where the seller just works on it a couple of hours per week, doesn't do anything. So that's something that a buyer that's active could really grow, and that's good for buyers that are buying many businesses, and they don't want to have a large team for every new business. They're looking at profitability, of course, especially these days where where we have the shipping cost and the cost of goods that went up, and it's such a difficult time. You want to have, they like businesses with high profits, but generally speaking, buyers are willing to, to acquire any business with, with above, I would say 15% profit. We've done a survey. I'll talk about it at the end. It's going to be published soon. But on the survey, buyers explain that that any profit is almost any profit is enough. So that's, we talked about the multiple, how to kind of evaluate it. Now let's talk about the process itself. How does it look like once you decide, you start the process? What do you have to do, and what do consultants do, and how does this process look like? So the first step, everybody talks about the financial, know your numbers, right? Everybody tells you that. It's generally true. You have to know, what your profit is. But if you don't know, you can just hire people who will tell you what your profit is, or either accountants or a consultant or a broker, it doesn't matter. Anyone in this industry.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about that?
Sure. Yeah.
I learned that sometimes your normal accountant that does your e-commerce accounting does not know how to run your numbers for selling your business.
Correct.
Not all of your numbers that are included in the sale, not all of your numbers are included in the sale of your business. For example, I have a truck that I use for moving goods between my warehouse and everything else. That will not be calculated in the sale of my business. That expense, my own debt won't be calculated unless it is related to the inventory that I'm getting paid for, right? The inventory on hand, that's going to be paid for separately outside of the evaluation of what's currently selling. Sometimes you don't sell your Amazon account alongside of your brand asset. So people get confused about that, right? You can't always go to your own accountant and get the right numbers, because your profit showing from your accountant might be different than how a buyer looks at your profit, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. And that's why I say you have, many sellers don't know what they don't know. And, and the accountant calculates, and then you have this kind of net profit before taxes. They have a number, they know that their profit is $1 million. But in this industry, we're talking about SDE, seller discretionary earning. And that profit it's not a net profit. It's a kind of adjusted EBITDA. So I'll explain what it is. When you're calculating the profit, what we do usually, we start with the preparation of the P&L, just like we explained. And the way we calculate it is we take your revenue and we calculate all of the, let's say, Amazon's fees, cost of goods and shipping, any advertising, that's related to your Amazon business, and any direct costs that basically your buyer will have as well, because that's part of the your monthly cost, and it occurs every month. What do you not include in this in the expenses? All those one-time expenses. So when we calculate the profit, what we do is you calculate the net profit, and then you add back to that profit the owner's salary, for example. That's something that's, the buyer won't pay your salary because you're out, okay? Personal expenses like your car, the rent, that's something that it's not completely unrelated to the sale, and the seller won't pay it. One-time fees like intellectual property, your trademark, your patent, you've already paid for it. So when we calculate the profit, that's not something that the buyer will have to pay again. So we add them back to the profit. The design of the website, masterminds and events, drinks with Amy at Prosper, reduced cost of goods. Let's say that after After 6 months, in June, you negotiated with your supplier, and now the cost of goods is just lower. What will the buyer have? So again, that's something that we'll negotiate. We see this P&L as the beginning of the negotiation. So these are example of things that we add back. Like I'll just finish and then I want to hear. And so these are the things that we add back. And then there are other examples of other things that we add back. We, by the way, at Fortunet, we're known to be a little aggressive on the adjustments, but we would never include something that does not make sense. Everything that we include, we stand behind it, and we explain to the buyer why we think it's irrelevant to the buyer and why it should be added back to the profit. So, for example, let's say you were suspended for a week. Okay, not because you've done something with Amazon, you wrote a plan of action, you explain it's their mistake, and then you're back. We'll calculate how much you lost, and then we'll show an adjusted profit. Of course, we show the reality. We always show the real numbers, but then there's another line showing, what it would be if it weren't for this suspension. You used air freight, a couple of times because you weren't organized. We will calculate the difference with sea freight, and then we'll add that back to the profit. Again, an adjustment. We show how much it would be with the adjustment. So if you thought you have a profit of $1 million, you may have a profit of 1.3. And this 0.3, remember that every dollar can be worth $7, okay? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. 300K times 7. That's not something that you just want to leave, okay? So that's, we look at that as the first step of the negotiation, and that's where many sellers who are doing the process sometimes directly with the buyer, they don't know that, and they just leave $1 million on the table, and they don't know about it. So that's very important. No, sorry, go ahead.
No, basically, I was just going to explain the add backs, and that I was going to say add backs basically are those things that your buyer is not going to have to take over. So, for example, if I'm using my own software for accounting and the buyer isn't going to use that, well, then that's not something that's not an expense the buyer is going to incur. So that can be added back to my value of my business. And so, as you were saying, how much money are some of these sellers who are selling immediately without knowing their valuation or their true valuation? They're just sending their P&L right from their accountant. They're sending that P&L off to that buyer. Hey, send us your information. We want to buy your account. Okay, great. Well, there's no negotiation happening then. They're not saying, oh, no, you won't incur any of these expenses. So we can, our actual value for you is this, right? And so that's just so key. I love that.
Yeah. So exactly. And sometimes it can be a lot of money. We had a seller, the second example is a seller who had a team of employees. They were actually working not really on the business, but on new product design. I mean, when we went deep, we saw the expenses of all his employees. And we said, okay, I mean, they work on the business probably. But then we said, let us analyze, like, what is she doing? What is he doing? And we went over one by one, and we realized most of them are not working on the business that's sold. The seller is very active, is producing more brands. And all these sellers together, their annual cost was $250, okay, to $250K. He initially included them in the P&L. We negotiated to add them back. We showed and we proved that they are not working on this business. The buyer won't have to replace them with someone because they're not doing anything that's actually very relevant to the sale. We added them back to the sale. You can calculate how much it is if you apply a multiple to this 250K. Over $1 million just by negotiating, and that's just the first part before you even started the process. So just, remember to think about that, at least have it in your mind that don't just, give up on the numbers and include the net profit. It doesn't make sense. So that's that. Another example, by the way, is a client that had kind of advertising issue with the coupon, who went over the night, and he lost over $1 million. So that's something, again, we neutralize that because it's unfair. I mean, it's a one-time thing. It doesn't reflect the real value of the business. And after negotiating, our position was accepted, $1 million. That's that, again, apply the multiple. So that was about the P&L. That's the first step of the process in most cases. The second step, we call it kind of storytelling. Okay, so when you have a buyer coming to you and making an offer, you have to control the story that you're telling. When I'm telling stories, it has some kind of connotation maybe, but what I really mean is show the real value of your account. There are things that you can show by just sending the link to an account. But when you send a link to the account, does the buyer know that you have design patents? Does the buyer know that you have 4 products in production right now? Does the buyer know that you already were approved to sell this and that, in these marketplaces, and that Walmart has just made, just is going to acquire, I don't know, 12,000 units next year? No, none of this can be shown by a link to an account, and that's why it's very important to present the business in the best way you can and give all the information. So you can call it a marketing deck, you can call it a presentation. You need to show the buyer, first of all the information that the buyer needs to decide if they want the business or not. So that's first priority. And then you want to show the full potential of this business. You want to show the different path of growth. You want to show what's the opportunity for the buyer, what they can do with it. They can just go to Europe, and then that's an easy growth of maybe 20-30%. You want to compare your business to competitors and show why you're better and stronger. Again, don't let others tell your story. Tell your own story. Make sure that you or whoever represents you shows your story in the best way you can. We have sometimes sellers saying, "I didn't know I was that good," after they see their presentation. It's very important, and and it needs to be very, very clear and accurate. So that's about the storytelling. Again, very important in that process. I wouldn't skip that stage, and even if it takes some time. The third step, which is the last step basically of the beginning of the sale, is the bidding process, the auction process, whatever you want to call it, a competitive process basically. So what you do is, instead of going to one buyer and negotiating with one person, basically one aggregator, let's say, that made you an offer, you negotiate, you got to a certain point. You can go to all the market at the same time with your smart P&L that we've talked about earlier, and with your presentation telling your story, going to all the buyers that have signed an NDA, by the way, and at the same time tap the entire market, which includes all the aggregators and private equity firms and VCs, and then let them bid on your business. And so what we do is once you present it to the entire market, they bid on the business. We don't have an asking price, so that you can, there's no limit basically. And then very often you do several rounds of bids until you get to the maximum price. And what we see is that usually we have, several offers that are kind of similar. And then there's one or two for which your business is worth much more. And we're looking for, for that one. And sometimes the gap is huge. We've had cases where the gap between the first one to the second one was $3 million. Okay, so let's assume a case where the business is sold for $15 million, and the rest of, and the other offers are $12 million. Okay, if the seller didn't do this entire auction, probably it would close for $12 million, right? Not 15. Maybe, I mean, it's very likely that the seller would be happy with the $12 million, would celebrate 12. Would they know that they missed $3 million? You only know if you do the process. So that's what we're always saying, when people ask me for, like, what's my valuation, I can try and guess and tell you, based on the last 3 deals that we've done, on this size and this category, it should be around this, okay? But the truth is, only once you go to business, to market, and you do all this process, you can know that you got to the maximum. You could not get more because you've done everything you could to present it the best way and to tap the entire market. So that's the idea. Again, we haven't invented anything. We're not us, not our industry. It's something that everybody knows from other industries. Here we're not talking about an open auction. It's not like everybody sees the bid. Usually they bid discreetly, directly to the consultant, and then they negotiate with the different bidders. So now that you know the process, the P&L presentation, and the auction, which is kind of the process to get to the maximum, and now that you know the factors that affect your valuation, you can try and think of, what would you do? What do you do when you have a year? What to do during that year? So we started discussing earlier with Amy as well. When if you want to reach a certain number, and let's say you have a year, you need to understand how much time you have, and based on that, you make a plan. So for example, if you have only 3 months, let's say, or you have only 6 months, will you start a new journey of opening a Shopify account? You've never done that. You don't know how to do it. It will take time and investment, and it's building a brand outside of Amazon. This absolutely makes sense, but I don't know if it makes sense if you only have 6 months, right? I mean, you're going to invest the 6 months just on something that you've never done. So what I suggest when it's a short period of time, I would focus on what you know best. If you're very good at, adding new products, conquering another market like Europe, do that. If you're very good at, launching variations to your existing one, do that. Just don't do something just because you've heard that it brings you a higher multiple. Okay. So that's something to remember. To maximize it, we were discussing earlier, you can start thinking about IP. You should start thinking about taxes. You should think a lot of time the money's in around the advertising. So that's something that very often we look closely when we prepare the P&L, and we'll explain to you where you are compared to the average, and where you should put your efforts to just have a higher profit. And don't take unreasonable risk, obviously, if you're going to sell soon. And the one thing to remember is work hard as if you're not selling your account. And that's something that sounds so obvious, and yet maybe 20% of the sellers don't do it. They know they want to sell, so they're not going to launch new product on this account because they're already selling, so they moved on to the next one. So just focus on your account as if you're not selling the business. Very, very important. Let me add two things before we wrap it up, and I was discussing earlier that we've had a survey at Fortunet. We ran a survey among the about 42 of the aggregators in this industry, and we asked them, which categories are you most interested? What would you like to buy, basically? And if you look at the results, it's very interesting. You can see here, the first one is home and garden. 88% of them wanted it. They could choose 5. Pet supplies, baby products. You have health and personal care, outdoor, tools and home improvement. Sports is also, a category that many want. Beauty, and then the rest. And then when we ask them, do you exclude any categories? It's interesting, and you can understand the results. Apparel, for example, when we're talking about fashion, most buyers don't want it because that requires, so you're buying an account with listings, with reviews. If it's fashion, very often this particular shirt is valid for maybe a year, but then a year later you would have to launch another product because this is no longer fashionable or relevant. So in that case, this ASIN with the reviews is no longer relevant, and you have to launch a new one. So they're putting millions of dollars on a certain listing, but then it won't be relevant in the future. So many of them wouldn't want, these kind of businesses. Same for electronics. You often have to change them because the technology changes. And then we're talking about there's supplement and food. When we asked buyers why, they said because of compliance. They don't want to get into complicated, compliance and maybe liability issues. So that's something so if you're starting a new brand now, maybe after your sale or during, just want another one in parallel, I would do it in one of those categories. Just to the end for you to know. That's it. You wanted to ask me about the actual legal process, right?
Yes. Well, I have 2 questions for you. And first, I'm going to have you go back to the slide where you have your contact information. Because I want to make sure, I know that it costs nothing to have your business evaluated by Fortunet or a company like Fortunet. And it's kind of like selling real estate. I put on the ticker it's kind of like real estate where, it doesn't cost you anything to have that realtor show you some houses. They get their fees on the end, right? Yeah. So, you have nothing to lose by meeting with a company like Fortunet and understanding what the potential valuation of your business is. And not only that, but what you can do to improve it. So definitely reach out to them and just have a conversation, because it doesn't hurt to have a conversation. You guys have been so helpful to us, to our private labels. I mean, it's so helpful to understand what we're worth and what we can do to be worth even more. And, I don't know if I'll sell next year or the year after, or, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds, but it's sure good to know what the value is and to have an independent party helping me with that. It's really good than just getting one offer from a buyer when I really don't have that solid information. So but what I wanted to ask you, so I'll hide the slides here. And what I wanted to ask you is 2 things. First of all, I have 2 questions, and maybe we can just pick which one makes more sense. Yeah. So I want to know, how long does it actually take to sell, to actually like walk away, phew, that's off of, and then the other one is, how do you vet a potential buyer? So even if we put our stuff up at auction, right, and we get a really great offer from a buyer, that whole thing might fall through, right? I learned recently from friends that have been on Shark Tank that those offers often fall through, and I had no idea. I thought, you get a deal with a shark, it's great, right? So it's so surprising. So those 2 questions, they're the ones that
I'll tell you. So regarding that timeline, it takes about a month in most cases to prepare for the sale and prepare your kind of what we call a smart P&L, and then prepare the presentation about the business, really telling the story of the business. And then it takes about, let's say, a month to get the LOIs and really, you know, sign the LOI with the structure and the you know, and the valuation that you want. And then once the LOI is signed, you start the due diligence process starts. So the buyer is looking at your financials. They're looking at the account health. They're looking to see if there are any issues if with your business. So you're gonna have to provide invoices and, you know, and really prove that the numbers that you've put there are accurate and that the business is okay. So so they go through the due diligence. That takes about 45 days, let's say. Then you get the APA, the definitive agreement. If it's an asset deal, it's called an asset purchase agreement. Or, you know, there's sometimes it's a stock deal where you actually sell your company and not your asset. That's something that we've seen in the last 6 months. We're seeing more and more. So buyers are becoming open to those as well. So you have the agreement, and then once you sign the agreement, money goes to escrow. You migrate, you transfer all the assets to the buyer, and the money is released to you. So as I said, a month to prepare, about a month to close an LOI, and then this due diligence process takes about 45 days, another couple of weeks to close the deal. So the whole thing is about 4 months, sometimes a little more, a little less, depending on the size of the business.
Okay. But in some cases where you might have like 2% here and you transfer all your assets and then you've got earnouts, are you required to do anything other than just, you know, how long are you on the hook for after that initial 4 months of like, okay, 2 months of kind of initial prep, valuation work, story telling, all of that, like get it all together, 45 days of going over the agreement, everything like that. We get everything good. Then we transfer the assets, all of that. What happens if we are on one of those agreements?
Yeah, again, so 1 month to prepare, 1 month to, you know, finish this whole auction thing and get the deal you want and sign an LOI, 45 days to do the due diligence. You sign the agreement, you transfer the assets. At that time, you get, as I said earlier, it depends on what you've negotiated, but in most cases, you get 90% of the cash. You just get it. You know, the big check that you were referring to, it depends what you negotiated, but if you negotiated well, then you should get about 90% of the money now. Sometimes there's, as I said, a deferred payment. So sometimes they would give you, let's say 80, 85%, 90% cash now. And then let's say 10%, I don't know, a multiple of 0.5 or 0.7, like I showed earlier, you would get it in a year, okay? So during that time, there's nothing you should do. You're just waiting to receive your money. There are ways, by the way, to secure that, to make sure that the buyer actually pays, like lien of the trademarks or your lawyer. This is where, you know, our legal expertise really helps, because we want to protect our clients and make sure they actually receive those payments. So for that part, basically, it's in most cases it's just deferred payment, so you should receive it, and you're just waiting for it, and there's nothing you have to do. Then the what we call the earnout, or those profit share that I was referring to. This is again where that depends on what the buyer does with the business, basically. So if as you're saying earlier, if this really picks up and and there's an increase in those sales, so about a year after you sold, things will be a year after the closing, things will be evaluated. So if the profit is higher, okay, and you've agreed with your buyer that you get 50% of every dollar of growth, then let's say if your profit was 1 million, a year later in the hands of the buyer, let's say that the profit is hopefully 2 million. that million of delta will be split between you and the buyer if it's 50-50, depending on what you negotiated. And then the next year, again, they're going to look, it was 1 million, now it's, let's say, 3 million. So those 2 million will be split between you. So you just wait and receive your money, basically. You have to ask, of course, your buyer to provide the reports and report to you, how was that year. But again, since you depend on the buyer, you have to come up with a structure that makes sense to you, where you're protected and where you know what happens if they're supposed to pay and they don't pay. But in any case, I would not, and I've seen that, unfortunately, I would not leave 40-50% of that deal in the hands of someone else, depending on someone else's performance. But that's, my opinion, our opinion at Fortunet. It really depends on how much risk you want to take.
Got it. And then just that last question of, how do I make sure that this buyer is a good buyer? We have all these companies reaching out to us. I mean, at least once a week, I get a new email from a new potential buyer, and it's like, oh, geez, So I luckily have close friends in the business that I can reach out to and go, is this a good buyer? Should I even bother? And then, but how does everybody out there that's getting these same emails, how do they decide?
Right. Yeah, so some of the buyers are, already well known, and you've heard others who may deal with them, and then but when you have, what we do basically is every buyer goes through an interview, they sign an NDA, so it's not just anybody, receiving your materials, and they also have to show proof of funds. So if they want, if they offer an LOI and they want to proceed, there's no way that's happening without, us knowing that they actually have the funds. And that's something they're ready to provide. They know, you won't be the first to ask for that, so don't be ashamed to ask for that. So yeah, that's something you definitely need to do, and not just trust anybody that comes to you and offers to buy your business. There's a fly around me.
Got it. So making sure that you're not just giving anyone all of your information just because they wrote a nice email to you. And also working with, on the legal side, making sure that they show proof of funds before you even waste your time to do that. And of course, like you said, some of them are really well known. So I think that pretty much covers it. We have covered every aspect of behind the scenes of selling your business, what could happen, all of that, and what we need to consider. So I am just, totally got it now. I mean, I think people have so many questions, but we don't just want to hear a pitch, right? So and a lot of times you go to these events and we just get pitches, and it's like, well, wait, I don't just want to pitch for you to buy my business. I want to know, what's happening behind the scenes. And I was really surprised to hear some of the crazy stuff that's happening, some of the tanking that's going on. And you just you don't know. And sometimes, it's the big valuations. There's so much that goes into it that, you just want to be informed. So we thank you, Yael, for informing us today. Thanks for being here on this special day of 1,000 subscribers. I think we're over 1,000 now, so that's exciting. But
congratulations.
Yes, and thanks to everyone out there for listening in. I know this was a lot of information, but it was very, very valuable. Don't forget that it doesn't cost you anything to meet with Fortunet and learn about how, what the value of your business is. And that will help you make more informed decisions. And that's why companies like this exist, to help you out with that. They of course exist to make money for themselves too, but it doesn't hurt to have someone help you get that auction and help you get the best offers, and also help you, if you're leaving $1 million on the table and they help you recover that $1 million and add that back in, well, I think that's they're going to cover their fee there, right? So
way more. That's the point about the consultant. If you're taking a consultant, you need to make sure that whatever you're paying is covered and way over what you're paying. That's the whole point of it. So that
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Yael, for being here. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and for everyone catching the replays, and for subscribing to that YouTube channel. And we will see you guys in an hour on the Seller Roundtable at 3 p.m. Central Time. You can go to sellerroundtable.com/live to join us in the Zoom. I have my friend Marsha Reese coming on the show today. She has an incredible story.
Yes, she's amazing.
She is really cool. So, I mean, whenever it's like fireside chats with Marsha, whenever I get on a call with Marsha, I just want to listen, because she has broken so many glass ceilings, and she's just an incredible woman with an incredible story. So don't miss that today on the Seller Roundtable. I hope to see you guys there. And again, thanks y'all for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.